I'm David Ringstrom, CPA in Atlanta, and welcome to our presentation on mastering large Excel spreadsheets. Sometimes they call this taming large spreadsheets. Over the course of our time together today, my goal is to share with you ways that you can manage large workbooks much more effectively. One of the inexorable things that I've seen about Excel is that many times the users have this desire or this pull to always go sideways in their spreadsheets, meaning adding more worksheets, adding more columns. And whenever we add more things going to the right-hand side of the screen, either with columns or worksheet tabs, the spreadsheet becomes harder and harder to manage. Now, sometimes we're just stuck with those particular formats because maybe that's just how the spreadsheet needs to be laid out, or it's just gotten to a point that it's too big to reorganize, like the banks that are too big to fail, spreadsheets that are too big to start over with. So there are still ways that you can reclaim those spreadsheets and spend less time getting from one place to the other and more time actually doing some work. At a high level, we're going to start out by seeing how to navigate large workbooks more effectively. Our second section will show us some ways you can adjust the view so that you can lock parts of the spreadsheet on screen or arrange to be able to see two different worksheets at the same time, be able to freeze panes more effectively, things like that. That's also in the locking and splitting section. We'll be delving a little bit into one of my favorite features, which is called custom views. And custom views allows us to hide and unhide multiple worksheets in one fell swoop. That's often the problem of large workbooks, is that we feel like we're locked into having to sled through all the different worksheet tabs, but there are alternatives that we can do. We'll finish out with some specialized tools that namely the watch window and the saving it large workbooks as an Excel binary file, which can speed up calculations and also cause those files to have a much smaller footprint. I'm going to be teaching from the Microsoft 365 version of Excel, specifically the Windows version. And I've learned over the years to start making that distinction because sometimes folks are following along on a Mac and the things don't always align, partly because of operating system differences, also partly because Microsoft has some favoritism for the Windows platform. Even though the very first version of Excel was released for Mac, the tables have tilted over the years, and there are, in my estimation, about 5% of features that are available in Excel for Windows that are not present on Excel for Mac. So that creates a functionality gap that can be frustrating if you fall into that. If you do run into any differences on the Mac that you can't reconcile, that's part of that standing email invitation. Drop me an email, ask@davidringstrom.com. If you're not sure what version of Excel you're using, in Excel for Windows, you can go to the File menu. Step 2, go to Account. Step 3, on the Account screen, it will show you what version of Excel you're using. So if it says any form of Microsoft 365, it might just say Microsoft 365 like this. It might say Apps for Enterprise. As long as you're seeing Microsoft 365, then you're using the latest version and you will be able to use everything I share with you today. If you do have an older version of Excel, then there are certain features such as the navigation pane that won't be available to you, but rest assured there are going to be plenty of takeaways no matter what version of Excel you do happen to be using. So our first section, we're going to see some ways that we can navigate large workbooks. We'll lead off with some worksheet tab navigation tricks. We'll then see another one of my favorite features in Excel. Of course, I have lots of favorite features, but the navigation pane is a feature that started out as an aid for users that use screen readers to be able to navigate in Excel workbooks. And the curious thing that I've observed about accessibility features in Excel is that anything that improves accessibility for those that are sight challenged tend to improve accessibility for all of us, no matter where we fall on the ability spectrum. We'll then see also how we can use hyperlinks to create custom shortcuts that allow us to jump to specific locations back and forth in our spreadsheets. So when you have a large workbook, one way that you can get to from one place to the other is to left click those navigation arrows at the bottom left hand corner of the screen. And that's the approach that a lot of users take, is they're sliding in tabs back and forth across the screen. If you right click on them, then you can display the activate window, which does give you a list of all of the visible worksheets. So one thing the activate window hides from you is any hidden worksheets. So we're going to address managing those. But within the activate window, if you double click any sheet name, that will allow you to jump to that sheet and let you skip the OK button. If you want to navigate by sheet letter, if you open the activate window and type the first letter of a worksheet, that allows you to navigate that list efficiently so that you're not having to scroll up and down looking for a sheet. You can then press enter to activate the sheet that you want as well. There are also keyboard shortcuts we can use to navigate back and forth between the worksheets. Control page down will move us one worksheet to the right, or control page up will move us one worksheet to the left. So those are going to move us back and forth until we get to the very first sheet or very last worksheet, and then they quit working. So anytime you want to move forward or back on a worksheet by worksheet basis, you can hold down the control key and use page up or page down to navigate back and forth. In Excel, here is a workbook that has a number of tabs in it. And if you do regularly work with workbooks that have a lot of tabs, one thing that you may choose to display is the worksheet count. So to do that, if you right click on the worksheet, in the newest versions of Excel, there is a sheet number option. So if you turn on the sheet number, then that adds a sheet count to your workbook. So then this way we can see that we're on sheet 1 of 17. So the way that I enabled that is I right clicked on the status bar, went up to sheet number, and then turned it on. So if you don't see sheet number on the customized status bar list, then it means you're using an older version of Excel. But in the newest versions of Excel, that does make it easier to get a sense of how many sheets are in your workbook. But let's say you don't have that option available. Another option that you likely will have available is on the Review tab, is the Workbook Statistics. So if you go to Review and then choose Workbook Statistics in the middle for the Workbook section, that will tell you how many sheets that you have open. So that is another way that you can determine at least how big the workbook is. If it feels like it has an in-terminal number of worksheets. But with regard to navigating back and forth, many users left click and shift the tabs back and forth by using the tabs there. Now let's see, looks like my scroll bars have gotten turned off, so let me turn those back on here. I sometimes turn those off when I am creating slides to have less clutter on the screen. So one way that you can see more tabs along the bottom is to come along and then adjust the scroll bars and shrink them down like that. Or it depends on what your needs are, whether you need to scroll the workbook or scroll the tabs. But if you were to right click on the activate button there, notice that this is a listing of all of the visible sheets. Now, if I wanted to get to, let's say, December, I could type D, that would take me to December. I could press enter, and I would jump right to the December tab. Now, there's not a shortcut for displaying the activate dialog box. The keyboard shortcut, you do have to use your mouse to right click on that. But if we were to type J for January, type J again for J, second now would take us to June, third time to July, press enter. We've then activated the July tab. Now, if I want to use keyboard shortcuts, if I were to hold down the control key and tap page down, then that's moving me one tab to the right at a time until I get to the very last sheet. So you're not going to bump yourself into the next workbook. We can